You're allowing your spirit, or the awareness of your spirit, or your spiritual awareness, to get connected to other sources of information, other sources of knowledge. It could be a higher wisdom, it could be another spirit, whatever the case may be. It could be a source of energy, that's something else that's telling you about something that's happening in your life, but you stare off, and your face will go blank. And that's what I noticed about them. Also, when I told them that we were here for like 2.5, 3 hours, they didn't think it was that long. They thought we were here for maybe an hour. So there was a lack of time. That also makes sense to me, because if you're mentally thinking about time, you're watching time in the matter, but if you actually are staying in a moment, or if I'm influencing them through my words and higher wisdom to stay in the moment, that's what they should be experiencing. You just lose time, because there is no moment. It's one big moment. And so when I asked them to debate me, that was a big step for me. And no matter what they said, I said, nope, because I would go back to what I said earlier, and then I would just expand upon it, and it all made sense to me. And they spent days. They would call me up on the phone and go, what about this, and what about this, and what about this? And all of it was answered. What was important, that was a moment where I challenged myself. And I think that was important also. That we should just accept that we know things, or just to convince other people. I think it was important for me to convince myself. I think that's my main source. I realize that people aren't my main source of guidance. I realize that people aren't my main source of love either. I realize that I have my own voice, and I can be as truthful with myself more than anybody else. I also realize that when I show a devotion to my spirit, or a love for myself, that gets me connected to a higher source of wisdom that offers me guidance. Here was the cool thing about this, after that moment happened. I realized that I couldn't do that before. I couldn't speak to people in that way before and ask them to challenge me. I would have fear. I would be anxious. I would be nervous about what they think. I would be concerned about whether I was right or wrong. All that went out the window, just with blind faith and just see if it's true. And I think that was important for me in life. I think it's important for us in life to challenge ourselves based on the truth. That it really is an independent journey for ourselves, and in this independent journey, there's no point if you're not open to the truth. If you're not, don't even go into this direction. If you are open to the truth, if you want to rise to an ability that you've never had before, that's where the direction I was going into. After that time, the next thing that happened to me was I could see medical imbalances in people. I thought I was crazy. I thought I was nutty already, but I thought I was really crazy. And the first time I started seeing people, and all of a sudden, energetically, I was getting connected to them, where I was getting information to make their health better. I was getting information on what was wrong with them. And when I started getting all that, again, I was going, this is all nonsense, but finding the courage to validate it with people and just ask them questions. And you know what I started doing is that I would have a conversation. I would get information about someone that I knew but not really well, and I would have a conversation with them. I said, well, how's your health? How's everything going with you? How's the health in your family? Without them knowing, I was getting information, and they would go like, a little bit in the back, and my elbow's not working right anymore. And so it would validate, without me telling them, it would validate whether or not I was accurate or not. But it was fun for me, and I think that was important too. Not for me to take life so damn seriously. Have fun with it. But at the same time, you have a group purpose. I have a sincere purpose, but have fun with it. So eventually when I started seeing medical imbalances, I started doing free readings for people because I just wanted to see if it was true. And I would start off in a loving way towards myself and just say, okay, if I get one thing right, then the next reading I want to get 2 things right, and then 3 things right, and 4 things right. I think there's too many times your brain will say, you didn't do it the way I want you to, so therefore you can't do it. You didn't get everything the way that you're supposed to, therefore you can't do it. And it would always try to talk me out of it. And I go, no, but that's not what love is. That's not my idea, at least because I was learning about the communication of love. And as I started getting all this information and I started validating it all, here's another thing I learned. Because when I look at the information, when I was connected to a higher wisdom or I was getting the medical imbalances, it was the same process. I would get inspired with knowledge. Whatever I became aware of that satisfied a spiritual need, I received knowledge from it. I also realized that I was always the receiver. This knowledge would only come to me, whereas before when I was thinking, it wouldn't come to me. So I realized I was in a co-partnership where I had a coexistence with the higher source of energy that was communicating all this. I know that when I was growing up, I never wanted help. I never wanted help from people. I wanted to prove myself to other people. I wanted to prove I can do it. I did it for many, many years, all the way into my 40s. And now for the first time, I was learning how to surrender how I used to be. I was learning how to surrender sole ownership over my life. I was learning how to surrender control over my life and allow myself to experience the coexistence and the co-partnership that was always there. It was me that was blocking it. It was me that stopped it. It was me that interfered with it because of the way I was taught when I was growing up. My main focus, my main source of guidance or higher wisdom was not my brain. It was always my spirit. And I was seeing the validation of it in my life. To be in front of a total stranger and tell them 5 things in their life, or 6 or 7 or up to 10 things in their life, that they had a medical imbalance from old broken bones to injuries that happened when they were a kid. How do you do that? Maybe there really is a state of spiritual wellness. Maybe this really exists. And that's what I was proving in my life. After that, I started talking to people on the other side, and I thought I was really crazy. Because here was the biggest fear when you started talking to people on the other side. Again, this is a big education for me. I was learning about all this. I grew up, there's demons. There's the Satan, there's devil, there's demons, there's some evil stuff in this world. And the last thing I wanted to do was to get in over my head where I was affected in some way. But I should be. And so the very first time I got connected to a spirit on the other side, I was divorced, and I happened to be a good friend of my ex-wife, who I haven't talked to in about 3 years. And they were still tight, and you knew they were talking a lot about them. How do you find the courage to do that? The very first time you talk to what you think, what you believe is a spirit, and they have messages for that person, where do you find the courage from? That's what I did. I said, I'm going to let it prove itself. And again, this is not my brain going, it's not going to work out, she's going to hate you, your ex-wife's going to think you're crazy, the lady's going to talk to you about all the other friends, right? All those things come into our head to talk us out of what our spirit is guiding us to do. But I was different now. I had to show faith. And that's what I did. And I got connected to a brother that crossed over in her life that was like a father figure to her. And there was an alcoholism inside the family, and she made a pact with him and said, you can't let what's happening to other people in our family happen to you because I need you. I can't rely on mom and dad. And when I didn't know it at the time, was right before I called her, the day before I called her up, she asked her brother for a sign that was on the other side, some kind of insight, so that she knew that he was fine in his new life, and any insight that she could have for his. So here's me acting complete faith, showing courage, showing trust, because I had no trust in anything. But allowing myself to go just to see how it turns out. And when I shared all the information with me, she shared that information back with me. And she sat there and she just cried over the phone. Here's someone who's connected to my ex-wife. I haven't talked to him in 3 years. And I go, yeah, I can talk to spirits. Can I talk to you for a second? But it was like a little miracle. It was a small little miracle. Because I didn't have that stuff before. None of that stuff happened in my life before. So I paid attention. And I had even more faith now. I went right back every single day. I would focus on this. Now I'm at a point where every day inside of my life, I contemplate God. I walk around not thinking. Everything is an energy to me. My whole perspective, my whole life has changed. My ex-wife, I'm married to her again. Wow. The kind of person I was changed. My words became different. I acted differently. My perspective was differently. What I was interested in was differently. How I saw people, relationships, all that changed. And when I started sharing information with her, because we had a daughter in common, it also resonated with her too. And after about a year of doing all this and us just talking and on the phone, we started dating again. And then we got back. Now she's my best friend. Yanni. My life shifted. My life changed. I caused the transformation. That's how I looked at it. That was another small miracle. Now when I go now I'm at a point where when I first started doing galleries for people, talking to people with loved ones on the other side, scared to death, had a fear, I never wanted to do this, I just wanted my life to change, but you have to go in that direction. The very first gallery I did, I think maybe like 4 people received messages. There was a room of like 20, or maybe there were 7 people or 6 people, whatever it was, but there was a room of 20. And what I do is, because I'm a student of all this, can this communication between my spirit and any other source of energy, spirits, a higher wisdom, God, animals, the future, the past lives, is all that possible? Is all that possible in such a way where just because I stay spiritually centered? And can that grow? Do I have the ability of making it expand? And so now when I do galleries, the most I've ever done in a 2 hours time, before it was 6 that I started off, the most I've ever done was 28 people received readings, names, dates, addresses. I haven't got a social security number yet, but I'm working. Wouldn't that be great? Your social security number is. There was a lottery number 2 where somebody came for a reading and they were a medium and someone came through with them and gave them 5 out of 6 numbers and they never played it. They said, the spirit said, if you think you're so good as a medium, I'll give you 5 numbers, you take that, you do the last one yourself. And then sure enough, that came true the next day. Yeah, I never played it either. Why not? Well, that's just it. Because when you go along with this, you're learning a different way of life. Nobody's here to guide you. Nobody's here to teach you. There is no book to go to, or I knew to go to explain all what was happening to me. And inside of this way, there's so many times where my faith fell short, where I didn't have the faith that I should. It wasn't just like overnight, all of a sudden I have all this faith. No. There were so many experiences that happened. There were so many things along the way. And that's what I share with everyone. What I share with everyone is that, and I'm going to talk more about it in the second half, but there really is a way of life that's based on the communication of unconditional love. Like I shared with you before, I can explain it to people now. We really have a spirit. We can be very spiritually weak, where our spirit isn't our source of wisdom. Our brain's our source of wisdom because our brain can be very, very strong. There's a way of living your life in a state of peace every single day when you learn how to quiet your brain, when you learn how to trust in the abilities of your spirit. In that way, there's a co-partnership that you're part of. You get inspired with knowledge, and it's your ability to be aware of that knowledge, to put that first. And so whenever I would get knowledge, I would be riding down the road and all of a sudden I get inspired with something. I don't care where I was or how late I was getting there. I pulled off the side of the road. I took a pen and pad out. I always carried it with me. I wrote things down. Again, if it was really true, then I was going to show it the respect that it deserves. And not just live my life any way I want to do some divine thing. I was doing my part. I always said too, if it was really true, in the end, hopefully when I'm 116, I look back at my life. If it was really true, I wanted to be proud of myself. The last thing I wanted is to cross over one day, and then all of a sudden, some higher being or some higher wisdom, God, angels, whatever it is on the other side that approaches me and says, you know, I was talking to you, Rich. You know all the times you knew things and you felt things and you sensed things? You disregarded it. I was trying to reach you. You didn't do your part. That wasn't going to happen. Because I know that for the first 44 years of my life, I couldn't do it by myself. And that's what I try to do. I try to control life by myself. I try to do life by myself. I didn't want help from other people. I wanted to do everything by myself. And you know what my proof was? I couldn't do life well at all. That was my proof. There is no greater validation than how your life's turning out. If your life's turning out in such a way where there's a lot of suffering going on inside of your life, it's not because you're meant to suffer. It's because the source of wisdom or the source of guidance that we're relying on isn't the right one. My diet changed. There was even a time when I was going through all this and looking at all the validation I got connected medically to certain kind of nutrients, herbs, and certain kind of substances. And when I took them, not knowing why, a mass popped out of my mouth that had been growing, and I had no idea what it was. I don't know if it was cancer, I don't know if it was cancer, but I can tell you it popped out of my mouth based on this. About 2 weeks afterwards, after that happened, after being inspired with all this stuff and going, what am I taking all this stuff for? I had no idea. This happened about 2 weeks later. I have this whole story. I'm writing a book about. Well, my book was finished actually. About me being connected to a spirit, which I thought I was crazy, who connected me with a friend who happened to be at a cancer hospital in Philadelphia with his father, who had stage 4 pancreatic cancer. And when the spirit shared with me, her brother, who was alive, my friend, just got the diagnosis from the doctor about his father. It happened within like 10 minutes of him getting hear all that. Also, the spirit of his sister comes through and shares his knowledge with me. I then shared the alternative medicine with him because I got inspired to do so. And he had stage 4 pancreatic cancer. They gave him 2 to 3 weeks to live. He walked out of the hospital a month later, or 3 weeks later, went home. And when he went back for his cancer test, 2 weeks after being home, he was clear of cancer and they couldn't tell him that. They gave him 3 weeks to live, stage 4 pancreatic cancer. It doesn't mean that what I've learned from all this, it doesn't mean that what I've shared with him or I get inspired with him to do is going to cure all cancer, but it's going to cure that one. And the most important thing, too, is knowing that it's not about just making somebody better. It was also healing the spirituality between the Father and the Son, because it was greatly missing. Remember I told you about a spiritual need? Like I said, there's so many different moments. That's just one of them. There's so many different moments that I couldn't do before that I can do now. It's based on inspiration. It's based on the knowledge coming to you by putting yourself in a state where you're more spiritually centered, and that's when you get help. That's when you're not doing things by yourself. And if you think about it too, look in life. Look at all the people that are famous that come up with ideas. Tesla, Einstein, composers, painters, current songwriters here. If anybody writes songs, they all said the same thing. Every single one of them said the same thing. It wasn't me. I got inspired with knowledge. Whatever you make yourself aware of, whatever you have a natural love for, and you make yourself aware of, you make yourself a part of. And when you make yourself aware of something, become a part of, you know what that essence knows, and it knows what you know. So if you make yourself a part of wanting to know more about the essence of physics, or electricity, or medical, or to write songs, you get inspired with knowledge. It doesn't come from you. But nobody teaches us this when we're growing up. But people do it all the time. And we just don't pay attention on how important it is to our life. Does anybody have questions so far? I don't know how long. Oh, there it is. Is that the right time?
Yes.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions that I can address? Yeah?
The communication when you started doing mediumship,
Yeah.
or any of these aspects that you're talking about, did you ask for any of them specifically, or they just happened?
You make yourself a part of something that already exists.
Right.
We can already do this. Our biggest resistance in our life is our brain. Not that it's, and I'm going to tell you in the second half, or maybe in a very short time, there's a difference between your mental thinking and your mind. Your brain works in perfect harmony with your spirit, but you have to have the right alignment. If you have an unnatural alignment, and you put your brain first, then we're getting our source of whatever the brain is capable of doing, that's what we're making our source of wisdom. When you put your spirit first, you're now aligning yourself with the way of life that we were born with. And when we were born with it, adding on to it, instead of understanding it all, and adding on to it, and making our life, making this a part of us, we didn't do that. So yes, the knowledge that comes through your spirit, and like I said, I didn't believe any of this. I've been doing this for about 8 years now. And I tell people I do not have a gift. Everybody can do this. and I teach people how to do it. And inside of that way, it's so important to become a student of all this. I always say that our divine purpose is to be more of God, or to be more of a higher wisdom or a higher consciousness. That means that we're working our way up. And our job is just to be more of whatever that up is, that higher wisdom is. And so, and inside of that way, the more we use our spirit to do that, if we're really a spiritual being, the more we use our spirit, the more we're going to get rewarded in the way that we're looking for. Just by simply quieting your brain, you get into the natural state of peace that you want to be in. Just by doing that. And think about what talks you out of. Your spirit knows knowledge. Anytime you have a knowing, anytime you know things, anytime you know what to eat, you know when you're supposed to exercise, you know when you're supposed to go to sleep, you know what people you like, you know who you love, you know what job you love, you know. That's not your problem. Your problem is your brain talks you out of doing what you know to be the truth. Your brain causes resistance in your life. That's our dichotomy. When you become spiritually centered, you don't listen to the brain anymore. You realize it was foolish to begin with. And when you put your brain second, your spirit's able to communicate with your brain by creating images, visions, words, pictures that all have absolute meaning to them, that have absolute truth to them. There's a harmony that gets achieved. Anybody else have a question? Yeah.
Yeah, what part did the Catholic Church play when you started returning to the Catholic Church?
So, one of the things I got away from, when you get spiritually centered, what happens is that you get rid of the labels. You see everybody as people. And it's not the images that they have. Like, I was an undercover detective instead of the patrolman. That has a certain kind of image and label to it that you look like you're above a patrolman. A sergeant would be above me. Our Catholic religion, the popes are above the bishops. When you're spiritually centered, you don't look at what society created. You don't look at what our society based itself on and its current philosophy of people going, hey, we're going to create a society and we're going to create things that are unequal. When you're spiritually centered, you see everybody with the same way, a lack of wisdom, or a lot of wisdom in them, or a lack of love, or a love of love. It's always based on that and the goodness. And so when you see, though, that there's been many times in my life where I would look at people and I would want to please them. I want to please my church. I want to please the priests. I want to please the bishop. I want to please my parents. I want to please my teachers. I want to please the supervisors at work. You know what I never asked? What about God? God goes, what about me, Rich? Do you ever want to please me? Did you ever want to turn to me for insight? I'm the one who created all this. I created your air. I created your body. I created everything. Everybody else that's down there, they're all finding my way. You hear about priests and the unloving things they do to other people and to children. They're no different than us. They're just people learning their way. And when you start looking at everybody as spiritually equal, then you start to have a different perspective about life. You don't compare yourself to other people. You always say, how did I do today, God? How did I do today, that higher wisdom? You did great, Rich. You showed faith. You spoke the truth. You paid attention. You opened yourself up. I love the way you pulled over to the side of the road and you wrote down the notes and the stuff I was being inspired you with. I couldn't do that. So in this new way of life, it makes sense that my main source of love is not other people. My approval doesn't come from that. My main source of love comes through my spirit. There's a divine presence inside of me. That's why I call my website Expanding the Presence. A divine presence inside of me that's been speaking to me for a long time. And now I just pay it the respect that I feel like it deserves. Yeah.
I have two questions. One is the answer, whichever one. Did you ever have a near-death experience? One. And the other one was, do you think that your job doing the undercover work, don't you think that you had to, doing what you did, just honed you and just prepared you to just be working on intuition because you're in a danger zone all the time? Doing that's really dangerous. So don't you think it helped you just like be relying on that other side anyway?
Well, if I was taught that way, but I was taught to think. So when I went into a job, I would always make sure I had plenty of support in the background. I had communication on me. I was wired up. People could hear my voice. I had a gun. I would watch people's faces. I would see whether or not, something was going to go wrong. I would use my brain to interpret life.
You never, I've often heard cops say,
Not that it doesn't exist, but go outside of cops. You in your own life, you're not in law enforcement, right?
no,
You in your own life, did you ever get inspired with knowledge where you just knew the truth about things?
all the time.
No different than cops, a lawyer, a teacher, the President of the United States. We're just people. Forget about the labels. It's the people. If you're spiritually centered in life and you go into any situation, a doctor, whatever the case may be, you're going to get inspired with knowledge. We do it every single day, 100%. I can tell you that I've worked with a lot of great police officers, and I've worked with a lot of people that shouldn't be police officers. And if that was true about every single police officer, where you had an intuitive knowledge about themselves, then all those police officers that they shouldn't be cops, they would be great cops. But it wasn't just true. Yes, there's always going to be cops that say, hey, I followed my gut, or I followed, but it's the same thing with people, no matter what job or profession you ask them, they do the same exact thing. When I started getting more spiritually centered, my jobs would work out, because before I went to the job, I could feel if it was going to go wrong or not. I could see where the drugs were inside the house. If I was doing a search warrant on the house, I could see whether or not somebody had a gun on them. All my jobs started working out better just because I could see when was the right time to execute the search warrant to someone's house, and I couldn't do that before. Yeah.
If I'm honest with myself, I have to say fear is a great motivator.
Yeah.
And
Which is great, because most people that have a fear of something, and I can tell you what fear is too, but most people that have a fear of something, they don't get motivated by it, so it's kind of cool what you're doing.
it's interesting. But I'm also, on occasion, I've tried to be quiet with myself,
Yeah.
introspective,
Yeah.
whatever. But I'm also the kind of person, I walk into a quiet room, I have to turn the radio on. I constantly have to have distractions in my life. And I don't know if what's keeping me from doing this is fear of what I'm going to find when I finally get in touch with myself, or whether it is just a matter of honing a skill, whether I just have to do it. I mean, when you first started this whole thing, was it scary?
100%. The first time I talked to a spirit, I was like, what if it's a demon? Like, I had no idea, right? What if it's all true? I've never come across pure evil. Pure evil. I've gone to, since doing all this, because I was opened up to the truth, I put myself in a position to be part of a paranormal team, and I would go to different locations. We would go to people's homes where they were scratched, they were pushed, there was abuse going on, it was all spirit related, there was demons. I would go in there and I would talk to the spirits and go, oh my God, it's really bad in this house. I don't want to talk to a demon. It was always a cranky uncle, or it was some kind of cranky person that lived in the house before that. It was the coolest thing to me, because I always saw over and over again, there was a spirit that was once connected to the earth, and when they lived here in an unloving way, when they crossed over, they were still being unloving. But when you can't see something with your physical eyes being unloving to you, your mind just says, that's a demon, that's double, it's not. It's just people being unloving, but you can't see them, so your mind misinterprets what's going on. When you were talking about, sometimes you have to put the music on.
Yeah, I just don't like to be still and quiet. And I don't know if that is because I'm afraid to get in touch with myself, or I don't know.
Well, you talked about a fear, so let me share with you what fear is, and you can tell me if it makes sense to you or not, right? Always look at fear, anger, happiness, jealousy, resentment as responses. Don't look at them as emotions. Look at them as you just were something that was divinely created just responded to you to tell you something. So fear. In 1 minute, there's no fear. In the next minute, over here, or 10 minutes later, I become fearful of something. What caused me to be fearful of something? I wasn't fearful 10 minutes ago. What caused this? And here's how fear, you get a response to fear. It's actually a mental response. You never hear yourself being spiritually fearful. You hear yourself being mentally fearful, or have mental anguish, or mental torment, or mentally confused. Your spirit has the ability of being connected with sources of energy where your experiences now in life will be loving. It will only guide you to loving experiences, loving people, a loving job, a loving direction, over and over and over again. Your brain isn't going to be like that, so it's going to share with people, and you can go, be friends with them. I know they have little issues, but eventually they'll work out, they'll be fine, or I can probably help them, I can probably do something for them, and nothing ever changes. But your spirit has a different philosophy about life, so mental fear. So if you look at a situation, say you have a fear of planes, you go, I'm not going on the plane, I have a fear of planes. What that means is that you have a fear of planes. It's not you have a fear of planes. You can't control the outcome the way that you mentally want. You don't have the ability of preventing the plane from crashing. If you have a fear of a mouse, you don't have a fear of a mouse. You have a fear of not being able to control the mouse so that you can prevent it from jumping on you or coming near you. If you had that ability in life to prevent the mouse from never coming near you, you wouldn't be fearful of it at all. If you had the ability of speaking, so a lot of people say I have a fear of speaking. You don't have a fear of speaking. You speak every day. You speak all the time. What your fear is that you can't control people to accept you in the way that you want them to accept you, or to agree with you the way that you would want to. You can't control that, so you have a fear because you lack control. So whenever you have a lack of control, or you feel you can't control something the way that you mentally want, a fear is going to come out. A fear is going to come out. Apply it to any part of your life, and you're going to see. When you're in spirit, your spirit says, I would never share with you that experience if it wasn't going to work out. I'm not going to tell you to go to that job if that job's not going to work out. I don't want you to be a friend with this person that's not going to work out. I'm not going to compel you to eat this food or influence you to eat this food if it's not going to be good for your body. You're not going to know why. Because when you work on blind faith, the first thing you get guided to, and we have to learn faith in that guidance, that communication that comes to our spirit, like I was sharing with you before, and you have to show faith in it. Then later on, you go, oh, I see. It worked out in a loving way, or it worked out in a positive way. So that's what our fears are. Our fear is nothing more than a response to something that we mentally can't control. So I'm going to pause right now, and then what we're going to do is take a little break. I made all this great food over here. So enjoy yourself, and then we'll start again in like 10 minutes.